In December of 2009, Walt Disney Animation released a film called The Princess and the Frog. The movie is about a woman named Tiana who gets turned into a frog after kissing Prince Naveen. It's like a subversion of the classic fairy tale. It features everything you'd expect from a Disney movie: likable characters, gorgeous animation, and catchy music. After meeting a gator named Louis, they head down the bayou and sing a song about how the three of them are excited to be turned into humans, appropriately titled When We're Human. Naveen has a line in that song that sticks with me.
Life is short, when you're done, you're done. We're on this earth to have some fun.
Whenever I hear this line, I can't help but think to myself,
I paid $60 for this?
Sonic Superstars was a game that I was beyond hyped for leading up to release, and then immeasurably disappointed in after finally getting my hands on it. I made a brief video talking about my initial gripes with the game, but it wasn't anything too complex. Just, game is okay sometimes, bosses suck. Now that half a year has gone by and I've played through the game in its entirety more than once, has my opinion on it changed? Well, the answer is yes and no. First of all, let me get this out of the way. Do not pay $60 for this game. The game goes on sale all the time, already reaching 50% off a few months after release, which is unheard of even for a Sega game. For the amount of content you're getting, I'd say it's equal to just about any other classic Sonic game, which were sold at full price back in the day. Except Sonic Mania is $20, $30 if you get the physical edition with the DLC, and that game is much more polished and ambition than Superstars does. Even Sonic Frontiers, a game that I considered good but rough around the edges, is a better value than this, because at least that game is fun from beginning to end. Well, except that stupid ass pinball segment. The announcement of Sonic Superstars came as quite the surprise actually. The year was 2023, I was working my IT job, fixing some dude's computer or whatever, and since he couldn't work, he was watching Summer Games Fest on his phone. And I was listening in, we were talking about it, I was telling him how I think Summer Games Fest, the Game Awards, Jeff Keighley are all kinda lame, and he was like, holy shit, Mortal Kombat. I finished the job, and in the time it took me to walk from his desk to mine in the IT room, they had dropped the reveal trailer for Sonic Superstars. So while I didn't catch the reveal live, I just pretended to go to the bathroom and watched it outside. And my initial impression was not very good. I mean, the game looked fine, Fang coming back was cool I guess, and the multiplayer focus sounded cool, but it didn't look like anything too crazy, and it was going to be pretty hard to convince me of a new 2D Sonic game that wasn't a follow-up to Mania. We've since learned that a Mania sequel could have happened, but didn't due to differences between Sonic Team and Evening Star, which is the studio that Taxman made after developing Mania. We'll never know the specific reasoning. Did Sonic Team want a specific art or gameplay style? Did Evening Star want to be paid a certain amount and Sega wouldn't put up the funds? I can sit here and give you my tinfoil hat theories all day, but as of now, Mania 2 is not happening. And Evening Star is off making their own games, which I think is great. I really want to try Penny's Big Breakaway sometime soon. So Sonic Superstars is instead a collaborative effort between Sonic Team and Arzest. The resume includes a couple 3DS and mobile games, some games in Wii Play Motion, and okay, not the strongest home console debut, but the president of Arzest is none other than Naoto Oshima, who was the guy who designed Sonic and was the head of development for Sonic CD and Nights into Dreams. He left the franchise in 1998 after Sonic Adventures, so it's been quite some time since Oshima's been around the blue blur. Oshima was featured in a lot of marketing for the game, so it's clear Sega and Sonic Team knows how important this stuff is to the fans. He even had a hand in designing Trip, the new character for this game, and spoiler alert, she's really cute and fits right in with the rest of the cast. Despite my feelings on this game, I hope to see Trip featured in future Sonic games, whether it be another classic game or even a modern appearance. As more and more footage for the game came out and people got their hands on the demos, I was more and more excited. From what I heard, the level design was good, the music was good, and most importantly, the physics and controls felt ripped straight from the classics. Okay, that was good. At least we don't have a Sonic 4 on our hands. They even threw money at Cybershell to shield the game and make a video about Fang. Sonic's marketing isn't always in touch with their fans when it comes to YouTubers and stuff, but they've been getting better. As long as they don't ever collab with the annoying Sonic tubers, I'll be happy. So I was excited. I thought this was going to be my game of the year for 2023, beating out Mario Wonder and Tears of the Kingdom. Two games I still haven't finished. I pre-ordered the Switch version because I wanted a physical copy of the game for my collection, and I wanted to have easy access to couch multiplayer. So I waited and waited for my pre-order to come in. Eventually it did, and I played through it, and we'll get to that in a minute. First, let's talk about the game's
Story!
Before even booting up the game, Sonic Superstars has two notable prequel tie-ins. The first is a one-off comic featuring Fang. This comic finally explains the in-universe reason why Fang has so many aliases. Turns out it's an intentional move from the character since he's a wanted criminal and all. Eggman sends Fang to the North Star Islands to see what's up, and he ends up finding Trip. Then there's also a prequel animation that's also about Fang. Can you tell he was a big marketing point for this one? Where Eggman seems to find something that seems to foreshadow some sort of threat. These prequels are cool, but I do have have one very minor gripe with them that I'll have to come back to at the end of the video. Now on to the story in the game itself. Eggman wants Fang to find the beast from before, and on the way out, we see Sonic and Tails flying in with the tornado. Like most Sonic games, the story then takes a backseat for quite a while. There are a few narrative beats told via act transition cutscenes. We see Eggman steal a mech from a temple, Fang abandons Trip, and Amy ends up rescuing her in a sweet moment that they share together. Then towards the end of the game, after Fang steals your Chaos Emerald, Trip betrays him at Golden Capital by going super. Eventually, the crew makes their way up to Eggman's space station, blows it up, and the day is saved. Hooray. It's pretty basic for a Sonic story, and I think it's fine on its own. However, I do think it does sort of fall apart when you take into account some of the stuff that's in the post-game. Again, more on that later. But just looking at the main story on its own, I think it holds up well enough. I know you all want me to talk about what comes next, but we're gonna put a pin in that and finally talk some gameplay.
31 hours of continuous gameplay.
In every Sonic game, especially a 2D Sonic game, control and physics are super important. And in Sonic Superstars instance, I've got no complaints. I don't think every 2D Sonic game has to mimic the Genesis games perfectly. Games like the Sonic Advance series and the Sonic Rush games prove that to be the case. Downward momentum, the way you bounce off enemies and slopes, this is what separates your Sonic Manias from your Sonic 4s. And Superstars nails pretty much everything. This game brings back the 4 playable characters from the classic games: Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy. Amy making her debut in Sonic Origins overpriced DLC from last year that I still haven't played. So this was my first time playing as her in a classic Sonic game. Honestly, she might be my favorite here. I really like how she handles. Her double jump makes finding shortcuts really unique since you still have to keep your momentum going, and it makes bosses actually bearable. The other characters are good too. Pretty much exactly as you remember them. Tails' flight, Knuckles' glide, all of that feels perfectly smooth. They even have the drop dash from Mania for Sonic, and it feels just as great here as it did there. Unique to Sonic Superstars are the Chaos Emerald powers. After completing a special stage, you gain access to a new ability. This was another heavily advertised feature, and I really like it. Some powers are better than others. Shoutouts to Clone and Burst for being my most used. Some like Vine, Vision, and Water are a little more situational, but they're still cool. When you get the 7th Emerald, you unlock super forms for everyone. Well, super forms, really it's just Sonic who gets one. The other 3 characters just sort of flash white and get stink lines. Come on guys, why can't you just make them glow yellow or a totally different color like the others? Because people made fun of Knuckles for being pink when he turned super? Unlocking all the emeralds also gives you an ability unique to each character. Tails can shoot out little tornadoes, Knuckles gets a punch, Amy gets the hammer suit from Mario 3, and Sonic gets a nerfed homing attack. I guess Sonic Generations really did inspire him. These abilities are really cool and all, but I wish they weren't tied to the emeralds, and instead were on a dedicated action button. I think that would open up a lot of possibilities. A big emphasis for this game was the ability to have 4-player local multiplayer. Not like hand your little sibling the controller so he can lag behind his tails kind of multiplayer. This was true on-screen co-op, a la New Super Mario Bros. Wii or Sonic 4 Episode 2. And while this sounds exciting, does it actually work? I think that depends on the crowd you run with. It's very easy to outrun people by accident. The camera kind of decides randomly who to follow, and it can be pretty frustrating. But like New Super Mario Bros., if you don't take it too seriously and just have fun, it can still be enjoyable. I've played with a few people, and I find it that if everyone is around sort of the same skill level with 2D Sonic, you'll get the most enjoyment out of this, since everyone will for the most part be able to keep up with each other. Do not invite your friend over and make this their first Sonic game. They will get frustrated by you either constantly outpacing them or you having to wait for them. If you're going to do multiplayer, try to limit yourself to maybe 2 to 3 people if you can help it, just to make things a little more manageable. Of course, the game is local only, which is lame. Not sure what the logic was behind that when Sonic 4 Episode 2 still has integrated online to this day. However, I'm happy to report that just using Steam Remote Play with 2 of my friends made for a playable experience. Of course, there was lag and some glitches, but it wasn't that bad, and we were able to take out the final boss, so that says something. If you want a more direct look at what multiplayer looks like, check out my Sonic Superstars series over on my main channel where I run through the whole game with 2 of my friends. There's also the game's dedicated battle multiplayer mode, where you can play as a customized mech and duke it out with other players. I didn't touch this very much. It's very basic and not very fun. There's quite a bit of customization, which is cool. The game's currency comes in the form of these medals that are basically the replacement for the live system carried over from Origins. It's not a bad system or anything, I just don't care. Battle mode is just really boring. And also, I tried to find matches online and just nobody is playing it, so I think that says enough. The level design in this game is a little all over the place. I think the first half of the game is really good, but what usually happens is that a level will be good and then weighed down by 1 or 2 really annoying gimmicks or set pieces. Let's take a brief look at each level in the game. Bridge Island. The game's opener is pretty strong. Aesthetically, it's like a mix of Green Hill and like Emerald Coast from the modern games. Reminds me a lot of Neo Green Hill from Sonic Advance 1. I like the wall running gimmick, and there's plenty of space to run around to refamiliarize yourself with the controls. The game's second level, Speed Jungle, is pretty fun as well. Both Act 1 and the act specific to Sonic I think are fine. Oh yeah, throughout Sonic Superstars there are specific character acts that can only be played by that specific character. While I love this idea, I think Superstars is a weird game to start this in, since they can only be accessed by that character, meaning they are single player exclusive, which is weird, and they are full length levels. To get around this, they were made optional, with the exceptions of Amy so that you can see her rescue trip. If they're going to make them only accessible by the one character, I wouldn't mind if during multiplayer, just whoever was playing as that character got to play the level. You know, just sit and watch them play a Sonic level for a few minutes, and I get to make fun of them if they mess up, but it always gives control to player one, which I guess isn't a problem if you're doing local multiplayer like they intended, but since we were doing Steam Net Play, there wasn't really anything we could do since the host computer is always player one. These levels are cool though. It's like playing the Knuckles segments of Sonic 3 and Mania, but a fully fledged level. I hope to see something like this attempted in the future. Anyway, back to Speed Jungle. Act 1 and Act Sonic are fun, however the second act is just ruined by these dark sections that remind me of Lost Labyrinth from Sonic 4. Combine that with the hectic multiplayer I mentioned before, and it's just not enjoyable. The next level is Sky Temple, which is a weird one because it's like 6 minutes long, which normally sucks for an early Sonic stage, but to make up for that, it's only one act, which I guess makes it a little bit better. I find this one to be pretty forgettable though. When a Sonic level only has one act and it's really long, you can usually feel like a middle point where the level kind of changes, and so it'll still feel like there's two acts or two ideas being presented. Sky Temple just feels like one act that drags out for way too long. Pinball Carnival is a really cool level. I love the music. The first act is a pretty standard mashup of your pinball and carnival design tropes, but then Act 2 mixes it up with some roller coasters and a spooky aesthetic. And again, gotta emphasize the music. Lagoon City is without a doubt my favorite level in the game, and the one I keep going back to. I want that world record, and I'm gonna stop at nothing to get it. Like all good Sonic levels, if you play your cards right, you barely go underwater. Stage has good gimmicks, it goes by quickly, I have zero complaints. Sand Sanctuary is another one-act level. However, unlike Sky Temple, this one's a lot of fun. The level is a little long, yeah, but you actually see the level transform a little bit over time as you run into more and more of Eggman's machinery taking over the zone. There's different ideas presented throughout. It really does feel like a two-act Sonic level condensed into one. Press Factory is another level I'm a little mixed on. At first I didn't care for its Act 1 gimmick of shooting you up into the air, but then I realized you just have to pay attention to the lights on the machine in the back and know when to jump to avoid it. It actually becomes pretty fun. That and Amy was made for this level. Her double jump is a lot of fun to take advantage of. I'm not really a fan of the Act 2 gimmick just being a Wars Sandopolis timer that insta-kills you. I kind of wish they did something else for when the timer ran out. Golden Capital I think is okay, the first act is fine, and so is the Knuckles one. I love the aesthetic of a lost golden city. The level design reminds me of Metropolis Zone a little bit, with the lava and verticality. It's a tough level, but more fair than something like Metropolis. The boss fights are really, really annoying though. Cyberstation is the gamer level they featured in a lot of the marketing. It's pretty good. The music is one of the best tracks of the game, and while this is the last of the one-act zones, I don't really mind it here because there's a lot going on. It feels like every few minutes we're getting introduced to a new level gimmick or idea. This is also the level where we see Eggman use that mech from before, where the twist is that the mech being used is actually your mech that you use for the multiplayer mode, which is a mode that no one uses. At this point in the game though, you probably don't have enough of the medals to do any cool customization to it, so I just put pink feet on mine. I'm looking at my script here and I literally wrote nothing down for Frozen Base. It's not like it's a bad level or anything, it's just kind of forgettable. The first act is a pretty standard like machine themed level. It doesn't really feel like an ice level. I think the only ice gimmick are these like ice cubes you can be frozen in that are kind of like Press Garden or Press Garden. Act Tails is pretty fun. I really, really like the music here. This sounds something ripped straight from the Genesis. And then Act 2 has you play like an on-rails shooter game. And I know it's a cute reference to some old Sega game, and that's cool and all. I get it, but it just, I don't know, it feels a little weird pacing-wise, and it kind of drags on a little bit. I just wish it was like a little bit shorter, you know, or it was part of a level instead of being the level, if that makes sense. Finally, Egg Fortress is your pretty standard final level for a 2D Sonic game. It's just you're in a space station. I really do like the gimmick of this one where once you finish Act 1, you play it in reverse, and that's your Act 2. And so stuff that was, a hazard to you before might actually help you cross gaps and stuff, and then the reverse is also true. Stuff that was helping you before is now a hazard. Everything I've mentioned is the base game, and that's just the gameplay and the level design and stuff. I think it's good, fine, great, nothing horrible. If this were just the game as it was, I wouldn't be making this video. I would say it's fine. However, in between acts, you all know, you gotta fight some bosses. Like a boss! The bosses in this game suck. Everyone has said that already. I'd argue they're the worst part of the game for me. In an attempt to be more cinematic, the boss's attack animations are more drawn out, meaning the time in between which you can hit them is pretty long. And if you miss that window, you're going to be waiting a while. They also increased the invincibility frames that each boss has after you hit it. This was done so that 4 people couldn't just wail on the bosses and destroy them in a matter of seconds. But all they had to do was just have the number of iframes be different depending on the amount of players on screen. Not being able to get at least a double hit on a boss is incredibly lame. Like, I have no reason to want to improve and try new strategies when I know there's really only one and it requires waiting around and hitting the boss when the game lets me. Something that I didn't realize during my first playthrough is that you basically are required to use the Chaos Emerald powers to dispose of these bosses in a timely manner. Using some of the powers like Clone or Burst or even the time slowing one lets you make sure you can get in enough hits. The final boss actually made me rage quit the first time I played it. It's not even the difficulty that got me. It was the fact that one slip up, you die, and then you have to go all the way back to the last room you were in. At least Sonic 3 and Knuckles spawned you right in during the boss fight, and its first phase was really quick. This boss fight has a really long and drawn out phase 1, where you can only hit it when it lets you, and then the phase 2 is just as equally long and drawn out, but one slip up into a bottomless pit and you have to do everything all over again. I know this is a thing I've complained about the most online and on streams and stuff, but I just don't have it in me to explain this anymore. If you like the Sonic Superstars bosses, I'd really like to know why. Like, genuinely, this isn't me baiting you or anything, I'm actually curious. Alright, so the main campaign of Sonic Superstars is like a 6 out of 10. But if you made it this far into the video, you know there's more to it than that. Because after beating the main game, you unlock
Each trip's a trip to paradise.
I've avoided mentioning it so far, but after you beat the game, you get to play as Trip in her own campaign and her own slightly altered levels. This is a modern take on the Knuckles campaign from Sonic 3, but fleshed out a little more. You even fight Egg Robo instead of Eggman. It's also made significantly harder due to the levels having more badniks and spikes. It's like in Mega Man 3 when you have to play the Doc Robot stages. I don't think it's as bad as those, but it's not much better. Honestly, the enemy placement just feels kind of cheap, and there's no multiplayer, so you're forced to do it alone. Trip herself is a fun character to play as. She has Amy's double jump and can stick to walls and ceilings. The level design does take full advantage of this, and you even get to go through the character specific acts from the main game as her, which is cool to see. The biggest difference is that the campaign's final boss is no longer against Eggman, but against Fang, who really has it out for Trip in this game. Like every other boss in the game, this one sucks as well. However, I don't think it's as bad as the main game's final boss. I don't know, maybe it's just Trip's double jump, but I don't find it as frustrating. Fang has some lasers that will kill you instantly even if you have rings, which is annoying, but I found learning their attack patterns pretty fun and pretty simple once I got the hang of it. The phase 2 is also not horrible. I particularly like this one attack where he's shooting these cobwebs at you and you just run to the right to avoid it. But after a while you can't do that anymore since the cobwebs stick around for longer, so then you have to start jumping around them. If you do get stuck in one, he fires a cork gun at you, which is an insta-kill, and yeah, that is bullshit. However, you're able to mash out of it. I don't know, this fight was challenging and unfair, but I just didn't hate it as much. Again, while I didn't care for her campaign here, I really do hope Trip makes some sort of an appearance in future games. After Trip's story, you unlock the game's last story. And like Trip's story, this one was unanimously hated on by the community. So much so that I couldn't really avoid seeing screenshots for it and stuff, so I was really curious as to how and why we'd be facing off a giant dragon. Like, what narrative reason would there be for that? Turns out, there isn't one. This gets foreshadowed exactly once when Eggman hands Fang a sketch of the dragon that looks nothing like it, and then it just spawns out of nowhere after you play through 2 campaigns, so you probably forgot about that. If you saw the animated prequel I mentioned earlier, this gets foreshadowed a little bit better, but there isn't really an explanation as to why this dragon is here. Did Eggman summon it like he would Chaos in Sonic Adventure? Who knows and who cares? So as for the boss fight itself, surprisingly, I don't actually think it's that bad, but it still suffers from the same problems other Superstars boss fights suffer from. They go on for too long. Attack animations take forever. The dash attack is back from Mania and it still costs 5 rings, but unlike that game where it just sort of exists, this boss fight is damn near essential to use the dash. But 5 rings is a pretty high cost when the end of each phase leaves you with 4 seconds where you can't do anything, and your ring timer just ticks down. In my opinion, instead of this move costing rings, it should have just had a lengthy cooldown on it, like 5 seconds. That way, it still can't be spammed, but it can still be used to get you out of a pinch, like those insta-kill black holes. Because just like the other final bosses in this game, dying at the end means you have to redo the whole thing. And this isn't a short fight, it clocks at around 10 to 13 minutes if you're not rushing it. And of course, those rings are sort of a pain to get. I'm not sure if this is a common opinion or not, but I think a supersonic boss fight is one that gets to focus more on spectacle rather than gameplay. Let's look at the 3D games for a second. Sonic Adventure 2 is often regarded as having one of the best final boss fights in the franchise. It's cool, you're flying around in space, Crush 40 is playing, but the actual fight, it's not bad or anything. It's a little bare bones, and it kind of sucks to control, like the rest of the game. But no one cares about that, because the gameplay is still solid enough and the fight is fun. I think this extends to other supersonic fights. Adventure 1, the advanced game, simple fun. 3 and Knuckles, I think, is the best at this. It throws you into a new gameplay mechanic and gives you plenty of time to figure things out. Of course, at this stage in the game, a game over doesn't really have any consequence because you can just select the level from the stage select, so you basically get infinite tries. Superstar's final story fight feels like it's trying to be a blend of Doomsday Zone and Sonic Mania's Egg Reverie Zone. I don't hate Mania's final boss, but I do think it feels very incomplete and hectic. Could have really used the actual level design and second phase that we know was scrapped from it. All of Mania's final act feels pretty rushed, and I think that's the worst part of an otherwise great game, while here in Superstars it just feels like an okay fight that drags on a bit too long. I just replayed Mania's final boss just for getting footage, and it's still really fun. Like I said, yeah, the gameplay's not all there, it's a pretty repetitive fight, but it's really fun. The difference between Mania's fight versus Superstar's final fight is that Mania has sauce. You feel something when you're fighting against Eggman and the Heavy King, whereas in Superstars against this giant ass dragon, you don't feel anything. There's no sauce. Before I wrap things up, there are some things I want to mention. I know I've been saying good things about the music so far, but that's only because I've been cherry picking my examples. In reality, this soundtrack is a very mixed bag. Some bangers like Bridge Island, Pinball Carnival, Lagoon City, but also some real stingers like the boss music, Press Factory, and that stupid credits medley that's only 3 minutes long, but the actual credit sequence are 10 minutes and I had to sit through this multiple times, god damn it. The graphics are good, I guess. When I first played this on Switch, I wasn't really impressed, but it looks better on PC. The load times were also really bad. The game has received several patches since then, so I don't know if it's any better on Switch or not, and I'm not really in the mood to play Superstars on Switch again. Sonic Superstars is a game I have complicated feelings for. I've spent a lot of time with it, which I don't usually do for games that I hate. But that's the thing, I don't hate Sonic Superstars. I see myself running time trials on my favorite levels for years to come. That way I don't have to fight the bosses. And if I ever want some silly fun with my other friends who are Sonic fans, I know exactly what game to bring out. Can I recommend Sonic Superstars? If you catch it on sale for 30 or 20 bucks and have some friends who also like classic Sonic, then sure, I guess. But there are better Sonic games out there. I don't really believe in review scores, but if I did, I'd say this one's a 5 out of 10 at best. And trust me, a 5 out of 10 Sonic game is much worse than like a 2 out of 10 Sonic game, because at least those ones are fun ironically. What you give is what you get. And with Sonic Superstars, Sonic Team gave us a game that just feels underbaked, especially when compared to the games it's trying to follow up. I don't really know what Sega is going to do for classic Sonic next. I know they said this game underperformed, but I really hope that doesn't mean they'll just never give the classic formula a chance. With how marketable classic Sonic is, I kind of doubt that, but we'll have to wait and see. Personally, I don't think Sonic Team should handle it. Whether they go to Evening Star or someone else, I don't really care. Just not Dibs, please, for the love of God. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. I put quite a lot of time and effort into this video. It was supposed to come out in April, but I kept redoing the script because I wanted to get it just right. If you could leave a like and share with anyone you know who's played Sonic Superstars, I'd really appreciate it. I'm going to try and get back to monthly uploads on this channel, talking about Sonic and other video games. I have a video about Sonic Mania I'm working on right now that should hopefully be out in time for the game's 7th anniversary, so I hope you subscribe and stick around.